So firstly, hello and welcome to the Soul Sync podcast. I'm Jason Paul. Now, I haven't recorded an episode for over a year and, well, I guess you could say I'm coming out of the spiritual closet again. You could say that. The last time I recorded an episode was back in last year. I think it was about August. And then I went on a week at the Arthur Findlay College, and do you know what? I just feel like I've been on such a journey over the last year, and I felt I had to put the Soul Sync podcast down for a little bit because I was learning so much on the podcast, and I felt like I needed to kind of go away and integrate a lot of what I learned. So if you're joining the podcast again, firstly, it's great to have you back here. But if this is your very first time clicking on this podcast, then you're in for an absolute storm here. I can tell you that. I can tell you that now without a shadow of a doubt. So who am I? My name is Jason Paul. And why I started this podcast in the first place was it was all about my mediumship. It was about exploring the spirit world because I was on my own journey. So to kind of bring you up to speed, my granddad was a medium. His name was Eddie Paul, but whilst he was alive, I never really, to be perfectly honest with you, asked him any questions about mediumship, which, looking back now, is absolutely bloody bonkers. How the hell could I not have asked him about this? But I guess it wasn't really on my radar of belief systems back then. Back then, when he was alive, I was going through, well, a really, really challenging time, actually, a dark night of the soul, I can tell you that. And he had cancer at that time, and there was a lot going on. And he did live quite far away from me because I lived in London, he lived in Southampton. And I absolutely adored him. But I was more interested in the tarot cards and things like that. And I guess the stories of my mum growing up with him and, the paranormal happening. So I was very interested and very curious about the paranormal. And then I went through, my 20s were very, very difficult. And I talked about, well, to be honest with you, I can't remember what I talked about and what I did when the podcast was on last time. So there's going to be lots to talk about on this podcast. I can assure you that. All things spiritual. If you are a curious soul, my God, you are in the right place. You definitely, definitely are. You'll notice in this podcast as well that I go down a million different rabbit holes, but I think that's part of the fun of it. So I didn't ask my granddad too many questions, and what happened was about, it must have been about 5 years ago now, or 4 years ago. My mum and my mum had me when she was 18 years old. We're very close. She actually works for my company now. We work together. And I tell you, we didn't always get on at the start, but that's a whole other conversation. But we was on holiday and we were having a conversation about death. Sounds like a great conversation, doesn't it, on holiday? But we were just talking about it, as you do, over a glass of wine or whatever it might have been. I think it was over a glass of wine, actually. But we started talking about death, and I just said, I don't like it. I don't the thought of it. And I just didn't even want to talk about it because I didn't even want to comprehend that one day, there is an end, we die, that is it. We exist our life and then we just die, and, the thought of my mum dying before me, the whole thing, I just absolutely petrified me. My mum was very matter of fact about it at the time. She said, well, look, it's the most natural thing. We all are born and we all die. Because my mum is quite spiritual. She is spiritual. She believes in the spirit world, absolutely everything like that. But, she's not wanting to connect with spirits in the same way that I do with my mediumship. But she then said to me, there was this book that she'd been reading on holiday, and it was by an author called Teresa Chung. And the book was called Proof of Heaven. And in the book, it talks about a lady who has, I'm going to do a really good job at describing this now, but the author describes how she studied near-death experiences for a very long time. And the book gave real compelling proof of, the fact we do live on. And even though my granddad, what was making me very, very curious about it all at this time as well was I knew my granddad was a a man of truth. He was very, he wouldn't do something like mediumship if it was not true. He was, that's what I believed in him. So that sort of then started leading me to more questions. And then about life, and okay, if this isn't the end, then what does this mean? Because by this point in my life, I'd grown up from very humble beginnings in London. I went to one of the bottom 3 secondary schools in the country. Giving you a bit of a whistle-stop tour here, aren't I? And then I became a magician when I first left school. I was very into magic at the time, very into magic. It was the kind of era of David Blaine and all of that. And when I was 14 years old, I was so passionate about it. I think I've always been a natural performer, and I used to busk in Covent Garden. Anywhere I could, I was very confident with my magic, and my granddad used to love that, actually. And then I became cabin crew for Virgin Atlantic, so I used to fly all around the world when I was in my late teens, and then I joined the police, which is a whole bloody saga, which, I might go into in this podcast, I might not. Depends how interesting. And that's another thing about this podcast. I am coming back to this and this podcast with a totally, I'd say different outlook. I think there's a lot of things that I've learned over the last year. And this podcast is all about, I'm a curious soul. I'm 4 years on my journey to becoming, becoming a medium. I am a medium. We are all got the ability to connect with the spirit world, and we're going to talk about that on this podcast. But I'm on my own journey. I've had to do a lot of growth over the last year because the journey of a medium is a healing journey. It's a journey of healing. And I want to share that with you. And I think at this moment in civilization, wherever we are, I want to bring through messages of love. I want to be inspired to talk on this podcast about everything that's going to help you on your journey. And by sharing my experiences and that of the guests that come onto the show, no topic is off bounds. I'm very, very interested about, obviously, the spirit world and consciousness in itself, because I've been on my own journey with consciousness. I think last time I recorded this podcast, I was on a big quest to find out what my power was and how do you activate it. Well, I can tell you that's a whole can of worms, which we'll get into, which is really, really, really interesting. And I was on a place where, I think when we left off the podcast, where I had been connecting with the spirit world. I'd received undeniable proof that it was real. I felt it. I've seen it. I've lived. I've kind of breathed it. And, I'm all about keeping things simple. I think where I got quite lost in my own journey of mediumship was in the first couple of years was I was getting lost in techniques on, we're going to push out the aura. We're going to go within to find the soul. We're going to throw our third eye back over our head. We're going to swirl our chakras round, open them up, toss them back. And I was getting lost in that because what that was doing was putting me in my mind. And I've got a busy enough mind, I can tell you that. I've got an ADHD brain. It's like a whirring supercomputer. So, I was getting lost in it. I was having spiritual experiences that, could only be described as that of the other world, the unseen world. The other world is all around us. We're going to talk about that on this podcast. But I've made along the way over the last year some really interesting friends that I'm going to bring onto this show. People who have explored consciousness to many, many really interesting levels. And, I want to bring people on that are really going to add value to you. If you are wanting us to explore a certain topic or something that might be of interest to you, which falls under a spiritual umbrella. So see, I'm being very broad on this show right now, but of course I'm going to be talking about my journey with mediumship. What my calling is. I'm on a journey to want to do platform mediumship, platform meaning on stages. Half of me thinks, why am I subjecting myself to such a path that kind of feels like, well, of course it's a level of anxiety provoking of going into a massive room of people, but I feel my soul's come down here on the earth plane to do is to do mediumship, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk on this show about the soul and what that means, what that is. How do you know if you're on the path that you're meant to be? To some people listening to this, you might be wondering, what the hell am I on about altogether? Well, if that is the case and you're still listening, we're going to be searching on this podcast for the truth. We are in a time now where, I think people are waking up. They're waking up to the lies that, are being fed to a lot of people. I'm not in the business of conspiracy theories. What I'm in the business of on this podcast is the truth. And, I want to be speaking words that are going to help you on your journey of life and exploring what that means. I'm a firm believer that life is short. It is, as the saying goes, and I'm sure we can all relate to that, especially when we get older, because time seems to accelerate like it's never bloody accelerated so fast. So, I think there's a lot to be learned, but again, I'm also a believer that everything that we need to know in our lives exists within us, but we get lost in the human experience, in our minds. A lot of us let our thoughts control us. And we're going to also talk on this podcast about emotions and the power they have and things that are interesting me. One thing I want to tell you about is something called morphic fields, but I'm going to save that for another episode because that's something that's really been helping me energetically on my journey at the moment. And absolutely, the reason I don't want to talk to you about the morphic fields now is because I'm going to do an absolute hash job at trying to explain what they are, because my very wise, beautiful 19-year-old, and I don't know why I say 19-year-old. I say that because yes, that is his age, but it's shocking because his soul age must be a lot older, because a very wise person, sort of ahead of their years, so to speak. But there's a whole story there. But he said something that really stuck with me, actually. To explain something in a way someone will understand, you have to be on the same energetic vibration as that thing, which to me actually made a lot of sense. And that, I guess that's the difference between knowing something and or believing it and really knowing it. You could say that as well, because I think being wise is how you explain things. I guess it's the art of analogies and the beauty of language. And that's something, again, we're going to be addressing on this podcast, because I want to be speaking inspired words of the spirit world to you as well, to help you. So honestly, this is going to be an exciting new season. I'm going to have some great guests for you, but what I'm also going to do is, well, before I stopped the podcast, and this is going to be an interesting experiment, I tell you. We'll see how this one goes. But I've got a backlog. I say a backlog of pre-recorded episodes that I've never released, and there is some beautiful, beautiful ones that I would like to go back to myself and to listen to my year and a half ago self, asking some of these questions. I think it's going to be a beautiful exercise and to kind of reflect on some of those beautiful listens that were contained within some of those recordings. So that's what we're going to do here. So if you do want to get in touch with the show with ideas or things that you would like us to cover, or you might like to come on and have a chat about a certain aspect. You might have questions about the spirit world, which I will try my best to answer from what I know and what I believe. If you want to do that, the best email address is in the show notes. It's very simple. I say very simple. It's actually quite long, but it's hello@jasonpaulmedium.com. Over on the website, jasonpaulmedium.com, that at the very bottom, there is a newsletter that you can sign up for. And that's where, as the weeks go on with this podcast, I'm going to be releasing some material that will really help. It's going to be totally free. When you do sign up to the newsletter, your details only ever stay with me, and I only ever send stuff which I really do feel will be of benefit. But I'm going to be sending out some meditations and things that are going to help you understand what your power is and how to access the higher dimensions of consciousness. We're also going to be talking about how to access your higher self and what things that I think are really going to help you. So if you're interested, go over there and sign up. But I'm really excited to be back with you on the Soul Sync. It's going to be raw, it's going to be real, it's going to be unfiltered, it's going to be a journey, I'll tell you that. But it's great to be back, and in the coming episodes, I've got some amazing, really interesting guests. It's so lovely to be back with you, I do have to say. But until next time, I'm Jason Paul. This is the Soul Sync, helping you explore the truth, exploring consciousness, and exploring what life is all about.